The purpose of this presentation is to assist the City Council in better understanding communication obstacles within the highly international and multicultural community of Sollentuna, and how these obstacles may be overcome for a more open and effective communication of the various messages needed for building a respectful and harmonious community. We shall begin by explaining the wonderful diversity found in Sollentuna, and then explore some of the things that affect our communication with each other. Finally, we'll suggest some practical ways to better understand each other and offer a plan for building a solid foundation for a more trusting and respectful dialogue. Let's face it, we're all different. We don't look the same, act the same, feel the same, think the same, or talk the same. In fact, think how boring it would be if everyone was the same. We have a lot of diversity in Sollentuna. With respect to gender, we're about evenly spread between men and women. Our family situations vary from being single, married, or living together without being married as sambo. We're a diverse group of citizens, with over 26% having at least one parent born outside of Sweden, and we speak a multitude of languages. In addition, we have 8 different political parties, representing viewpoints ranging from ultra-conservative to ultra-liberal positions. Even our interests are widespread. Sports, religion, culture, and other interests take up much of our free time when we're not working. Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam are all well represented in our community that spans all ages. With such diversity, it's easy to understand how we can be misunderstood. In 1948, C.E. Shannon introduced a simple diagram to explain how things can be lost in translation. When noise is introduced into the communication chain, reception is likely to get distorted and misinterpreted. But what is this noise we're speaking of? It's interference caused by the circumstances, stereotypes, and filters that affect how we interpret things. William Dilthey, considered the father of modern hermeneutics, claimed that understanding history provided the basis for understanding the world around us. Yet one of the paradoxes of the hermeneutical approach is that history is always changing, depending upon one's perspective. The hermeneutical approach to phenomenology concentrates on the interpretation of the message. It's an approach that attempts to embrace a variety of circumstances, philosophies, and definitions that provide room for other approaches to be presented as well. Traditionally, hermeneutics has its roots in biblical interpretation as a tool with which a particular text could be more accurately understood from both a historical and cultural perspective. The hermeneutical method made the text of history come alive to the people of today. In order to comprehend a message as intended, it's crucial to understand the context within which it was expressed. Therefore, we need to understand the traditions surrounding it and strip away presuppositions, assumptions, and scientific objectivity. One should see interpretive hermeneutics as a complement to the objectivity of science. Palmer says, "Man does not escape from history, for he is what he is through history." History is ultimately a series of worldviews, and we have no firm and fixed standards of judgment for seeing the superiority of one worldview over another. We tend to categorize and place people into groups like race, gender, and culture in order to understand them according to our own orientation and expectations. According to Gadamer, we can never be free of the prejudices that have formed us. Even though we think we are objective, we are in fact conditioned by historical circumstances and unconsciously dominated by them. If we fail to admit that we are affected, we can never see reality. Gadamer a great contributor to hermeneutical phenomenology, says, "Tradition is a genuine partner in dialogue." He took hermeneutics to an entirely new level by introducing what he called the openness to the tradition characteristic of historically affected consciousness. Simply stated, it is this openness that allows genuine human communication by recognizing and accepting that there are some things that do not agree with my understanding. It is being aware of my limitations. This is the knowledge of not knowing. Gadamer summarizes, "In analyzing the hermeneutical phenomenon, we have stumbled upon the universal function of language. Understanding and interpretation are related to verbal tradition in a specific way, but at the same time they transcend this relationship, not only because all the creations of human culture, including the nonverbal ones, can be understood in this way, but more fundamentally because everything that is intelligible must be accessible to understanding and to interpretation. What is true of understanding is equally true of language. They cannot be treated as something for empirical investigation. Therefore, we cannot take things at face value alone. We must examine all in the light of tradition and circumstance in order to really hear what the other is saying. This is the beginning of true dialogue." Conversation is about understanding. In every true conversation, each person opens himself to the other and truly accepts the other's point of view as valid and transposes himself into the other to such an extent that he understands what the other is saying. At the heart of the phenomenological tradition in communication theory is the question of how we experience others. What we do with this experience with regard to our own limitations of understanding, authenticity, and interpretation is essential in any dialogue we enter. Understanding one another is a problem as old as mankind. Oral tradition says the American Indian suggested that one should walk in his neighbor's moccasins to fully understand his neighbor. Being able to see things as others see them is essential to good communication and the establishment of a respectful relationship. By changing our perspective, we're able to better understand reality and value each other as we appreciate our diversity and leverage it for the common good. It is when we leave the I perspective and transition to a we perspective that true communication can begin. When we don't respect others and their opinions, we dehumanize them by taking away their right to have an opinion. But what practical things can we do to better understand each other? If you'd like to know more about the phenomenological approach, Robert Craig suggests that you first speak with a friend until you find something you both disagree about. Continue the conversation until you can explain the other's position. Second, speak with someone who looks different than you. Continue this conversation as well until you can explain the other's position. Finally, speak to someone who holds a different belief system than yourself, and continue this conversation too until you can explain the other's position. Has your understanding changed? Do you still carry the presuppositions you began with? According to Shepard, most people have two basic human desires. A. They want to be able to influence their own destiny and feel that they matter. And B. They want to belong. Another way to say this would be that they desire to be respected and loved. We must find ways to bridge the gap that keeps us apart and join on common ground. Often, groups talk past each other, even when they have the same ultimate goals. Since their ways of achieving their goals may not be the same, they may fail to recognize their commonality. In order to bridge the chasm of miscommunication and misunderstanding, we need to first lay a proper foundation. By focusing on our commonality, we build bridges rather than walls. The first level is to see our commonality by preparing a communal timeline. This is our shared history. Then we need to explore our connections and discover our similarities. Finally, we begin integrating our common experiences, for these have made us stronger together. On the next level, we build a relationship on that common ground, evidenced by generosity, harmony, and respect. With these elements in place, a foundation for trusting and respectful dialogue is in place, and we've laid the foundation for building a harmonious culture. It's important to remember that the culture we build in our community is a direct reflection of the leadership of our community. According to James Koussis and Barry Posner, culture is the organizational equivalent of a person's character. The behavior that is modeled becomes the behavior that is followed. When it comes to values, we cannot merely put up a sign and expect people to believe in it and follow it. As leaders, we must set the tempo of cultural change with our own lives as examples. We must walk the talk. We show our constituents that we believe it when our lives reflect it, for we cannot expect them to follow something we do not ourselves value. In this presentation, we've discussed our diversity and seen the importance of understanding our differences in order to establish better communication with each other. We've seen how messages may become distorted and misinterpreted due to noise in the communication chain between transmission and reception. We've offered an explanation of this noise as a result of the various filters through which we listen to and view each other. We've also offered some practical ways in which we may better understand each other and suggested steps for creating a solid foundation of commonality on which to build a culture of trusting and respectful dialogue. With this understanding of our diversity, communication, and what is needed for building a culture of trusting and respectful dialogue, it is our hope that a more harmonious community may be formed, where all can thrive.